with a clean towel. If there is no water, do the same washing motions with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer containing at least 70% alcohol.
Wash your hands, wash them right.
This message brought to you courtesy the Bureau of Health Education of the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
The diaspora, as well as welcoming our international viewers. We are live at the Saint Lucia House of Assembly. Today we will be seeing that the Parliament of Saint Lucia will be discussing the state of emergency, that proclamation that was made yesterday by Governor General Sir Emmanuel Neville Snap. That proclamation came after the Governor General was satisfied that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of COVID-19, which is an infectious disease commonly known, referred to previously as the coronavirus. Now, the Constitution of St. Lucia gives the Governor General the power to declare a state of emergency after he is satisfied with the following: that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the imminence of a state of war between St. Lucia and the foreign states, that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of an earthquake, hurricane, flood, fire, and outbreak of pestilence or infectious disease or other calamities similar to the foregoing, or as well as action that has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person of such a nature, and so on an extensive scale as to be likely to be endangerment to the public safety or to deprive the community of any substantial portion of the community of supplies or services essential to life. And on the floor this morning, as we're going to have the sitting of the lower house and upper house today, the resolution that the Parliament approves the draft emergency powers of a COVID-19 order by an affirmative resolution of Parliament to reduce the spread of COVID-19 and to provide for the declaration of a quarantine facility to isolate persons with COVID-19, the detention of persons with COVID-19, the imposition of restrictions and requirements on persons with COVID-19, the isolation of persons suspected to be infected with COVID-19, the screening requirements for persons with COVID-19, the requisition of a building, ship, aircraft or article, the requisition of an essential service, and the waiver of procurement rules, the reporting requirements, the revocation of suspension of permits for use of public open spaces, no prohibition of assembly of persons, or rather the prohibition of assembly of persons, the imposition of social distancing or isolation, the imposition of a curfew, the restriction of access of an area, the power to stop, detain and arrest a person, the publication of false statements, and the authorization for international or regional forces. Second resolution is that the Parliament approves the declaration of the state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public disease commonly known as COVID-19 for a period of 26 days commencing the 31st day of March 2020 and ending on the 26th day of April 2020. And so what we will be seeing here is something that is going to change the lives of St. Lucians, if not for the foreseeable future, but at least in the next month. So I am Mr. Joseph, and I am joined as usual by colleague Primus Hutchinson. Primus, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, bonjour. Lisa, monsieur, madame, tout le monde qui est à côté, qui a regardé à Saint Lucia et les autres pays qui ont la terre. Aujourd'hui, c'est une spéciale session qui est Parlement. Côté gouverneur général, j'ai fait une proclamation. Ça a fait bien souvent, ça a fait un pays une cette situation qu'on secoue désastre et qu'a fait et que ça fait un résultat de situation maladie corona COVID-19 et qu'on peut savoir qui pays a une décision japonaise pour fermer opération en pays en diverses façons. Il y en a dans c'est pour depuis à 11h pour je sais que bon matin la panique autorisation pour marcher en rond et faire des activités. Alors pays a fermé tous les jours à 11h pour je sais que bon matin. Alors les membres Parlement qui ont joué siècle, les membres Sénat pour ça faire ça à loi, l'année diffère ça il y a passer en loi ça là pour gouverner situation ça là qu'on laisse dans tout moment là. En premier c'est ça il y a faire c'est en déclaration pour mettre le monde à la facilité, ça c'est mon yo découvert qui ni maladie aussi mettez cette côté parce que c'est pas tout le monde qui a différents degrés à maladie pour mettre le monde dans côté si yo découvert qui yo péni maladie ça là yo aussi qu'a poser restriction à ce monde qui yo peut découvert ni maladie ça là yo aussi qu'a isolé mettre le monde à part qui yo peut trouver affecté la maladie. Il y a aussi la loi qui a adressé au côté de faire l'examination à ce monde qui peut regarder si ce monde a une maladie, pour aussi garder pour place établissement, bateau, et l'autre comme ça, si c'est nécessaire, aussi pour mettre en opération, qu'on nous-mêmes qu'a fait, service qui est nécessaire en pays entre ça là et que pour ça fait tous ces différents qui est en place pour effacer ça pour le moment pour une cause à faire aller comme doit être aussi là il y a un pile bagaille qui est un bout à présent qu'on licence l'auto et fait comme ça il faut mettre un bout à ça pour le moment pour mon assembler en grande quantité tout ça qui vient à bout et déjà vient à bout quand on attend à parler de social distancing ça c'est pour mettre en distance en face au monde qui a assemblé comme on dit pour à présent monde pas s'assembler monde pas aller venir en pays à fermer c'est que pour juste 11h pour je sais que bon matin loi qui fait possible pour les poser avec les autres arrêtés personnes qui allaient contre ces lois ça là qui est en place et que si ou personne mettait personne rapport qui compte qui pas parler la vérité ou quand peut trouver en situation côté loi qui peut action contre et aussi autorisation pour ça trouver support régional et international. Alors, le Parlement a joué ensemble ici à Parlement pour discuter ça, pour faire ça à la loi. Le Parlement aussi, Sénat là, et le gouvernement en tout. Lisa?
Yes, Finance. It has been a very interesting 24 hours for Saint Lucia, because as you indicated that on Monday we did see the beginning of the scale back of operations of commercial activity in the country, commercial and social. That's important to stress. Commercial and social activity, a scale back of that in the country. Now with the state of emergency coming into effect, we will be hearing much more when the Prime Minister speaks in the Parliament today regarding as to how much of that is going to change, whether there's going to be some sort of expansion of some of the regulations already put in place. Last evening, the Prime Minister, alongside the Honourable Gary Joseph, they were at the studios of the GIS NCN and discussing a preview of what's happening today. And the Prime Minister last evening made a very impassioned plea. It was he was very passionate about asking citizens to really abide by the protocols, abide by the rules and regulations. Because what is at stake for us as a country is beyond what we could ever possibly imagine in terms of the contagion that is out there. And we see it. We saw what happened in China. Italy is there as an example. France is there as an example. The US is there as an example, which is so much closer to us. And so we need to understand that by any means necessary, we have to do what it takes in order for us not to be faced with that level of contagion. Very disturbing for the Prime Minister, the reports of persons coming in on pirogues and some of those illegal entry points that we have on Ireland. We know that we have an exceedingly porous border, and so people are now using that opportunity to come across from the French Republic and come to promise. The question is, why will our people be doing this when there was the official offer for them to return to Saint Lucia, and the only requirement was for them to be quarantined? But again, not wanting to comply, you had some people who decided that they would remain, and now what we have is an influx of persons coming into these illegal ports. So today, with this state of emergency proclamation, what we'll be seeing, measures are now going to be put in place to manage that situation. And so under the state of emergency, a lot of some of the procedures and processes are going to be removed. What may be considered as a sort of a slowing down of getting things done here on Ireland will be removed, and giving the Prime Minister a free hand, if you will, in order for him to make the sort of decisions that are necessary at the moment, and to ensure that all resources are provided for the fight against COVID-19. He did indicate last evening that depending on what you see on the ground, the level of compliance with the general public, there may be an expansion of this 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. The police will be effecting arrest and primers. One of the things that the Prime Minister said that resonated was that once people are arrested, there is nothing about trying to keep them in that social distancing. You're really and truly going to be there in a facility. And he said it quite plainly, he cannot guarantee that the people that you are going to be placed in with may not have COVID-19. And so that is for you now to decide on whether you are going to comply and ensure that not only are you keeping yourself safe, but you're keeping your loved ones safe as well. And so today, panels, the state of emergency as decreed by the Governor General, it's really only for 7 days, and the Parliament is looking to extend that to a 30-day period. Also, last evening we did hear from the Transport Minister, Honourable Gary Joseph, and he did announce some measures that will alleviate the financial stress for the persons at this time. I know a lot of people were worried about the renewal of the driver's license and ensuring that they're complying with the regulations. There now is no requirement for you to worry about the payments of those driver's licenses, at least for the next 3 months, if I am not mistaken. So driver's licenses which expired on the 1st of March 2020 is an extension of time given for the payment of that, as well as the vehicle licenses. But Primus, what is most important that the Transport Minister said last evening, and that is to do with the transportation, the public transportation system. And he warned the bus drivers to comply, as well as the public. 10 people are allowed on the buses, 10. And he warned that if and when they caught, they will have to face the heavy hand of the law in that respect. The route permits will be suspended and the buses will be impounded. And what was really pointed out last evening was that with the courts being closed at this time, the idea of being able to get these buses out of impound, we'll have to wait, because we're not quite sure how long the systems will be out of function. And so in order to prevent all of this situation, what needs to be done is for people to comply. And for your own safety, if you are a commuter and you stop a bus and you see that the bus already probably has 14 people as it should not, you ought not to go on that bus. Personal responsibility. Don't go. Wait for another. And if you are courageous enough, you should take down that license plate and you should make that report. And in order for us to be able to have everyone stay safe, staying safe is the primary concern. Promise one other point coming out last evening. A lot of people have been concerned about whether there's a stimulus package coming, because we know that with more than 15 hotels closing, albeit temporarily, but temporarily means for the next 3 months, perhaps for the next 6 months, perhaps for the next year. We don't know what temporary means under the situation of COVID-19. And so the Prime Minister did indicate that there will be a stimulus package. However, the idea now is for us to be able to have the dialogue. It is important for dialogue to be happening with all of the stakeholders in order for there to be a sort of consensus and for no one to be left behind once a stimulus package is announced. A detail in that is that loans that have been approved, what's now going to happen is that the Prime Minister has indicated that at least 1 or 2 of those loans will be used in order to finance that stimulus package. However, we do not have enough information as yet, as he indicated last evening, and so he will have to have that conversation with all of the stakeholders. Hopefully there will be some consensus that will be arrived at soon enough. We're beginning to see the Parliament chamber fill up, and we also notice Primus the social distancing that is happening, because when we came in, it was one of the observations. We were wondering, well, how would they be affecting this social distancing where when you have the parliamentarians who must sit side by side around the table there. And so we see now that we do have chairs that are placed on the outside, and so you have individuals sitting feet apart in order to ensure that we have the social distancing taking place. Comment?
Ok, merci Lisa. Associé Lisa dit, monsieur, madame, 2 points nous voulons mettre attention sur ces prémices là et ministre des Affaires Développement économique, nous tenu en conférence et puis le même média GIS, ça c'était hier soir, et le Premier ministre là fait un appel pour les citoyens, c'est point situation maladie ça l'a sérieux autant parce que ça a pénétré autant parce que alors cette lycéen qui a descendu sorti particulièrement pays Martinique qui a descendu contre il a fait ça qui contre loi il pas descendre en façon qui est supposé il a descendre par bateau à ce divers côtes sur côté qui qu'on n'a pas supposé faire en divers cette côte là cette ici et il a fait ça sans passer comme ça immigration avec comme ça capoter chaque problème pour payer parce que c'est ça là qui descend sans gouvernement ni pièce contrôle ça il a fait il a exposé l'autre monde pour maladie ça là et premier ministre a demandé pour ça de bout parce que ça qui a fait c'est le gouvernement loi qui pour contrôle ça et le loi est comme le ministre l'a dit si on est dans la situation ça là pour un bateau sorti Martinique descendre cette ici et quand tu es en divers côtés leur soit côté monde par à faire comme ça sortir à ces diverses communes pour ça c'est une façon quand on ça si même maladie ça là si police trouve tu vois il y a tout la bonne pièce garantissement qui il y a mettre à côté au santé avec une protection contre maladie ou ça trouve qu'on pas même monde qui ni maladie à ça là parce que c'est eux qui mettent quoi dans situation ça là alors ça là il a demandé il a plaidé à ce monde pour de ça que monde si la famille et les autres monde qui savent la ni monde qui descendent sortir pays comme Martinique bon bateau leur souhait et que la du monde capture on ne peut faire police ça on ne peut faire loi connaître ça parce que ça qui a fait c'est pile c'est ça là qui exposé si il y a une maladie il y a exposé tout le monde qui a une maladie et ça ne cause aucun problème c'est ça le gouvernement qui a essayé gouvernement code après ça pour maladie ça l'a pas signé à cette situation l'autre on a Guy Joseph parlé sur ça il y a un point à faire c'est dit pour chauffer l'auto ni pas plus que 10 moun moi quoi à bord l'auto et pour empêcher dans trop monde combler dans l'auto à bord si chauffer l'auto ça va pas suivre avec ça là il y a auto aussi et qu'on il peut pas auto qu'on perdre route dans nous et que sur l'auto ça là il peut contrôler l'auto il peut saisir c'est pas directement saisi pour payer notamment mais il y a chébé l'auto ça là ou pas qu'il y service l'auto ça là pour un certain temps et il y a suspendre route ban aussi alors c'est ça que fait recommander pour ces chauffeurs l'auto à suivre règle là et ni ani ça il supposé ni 10 moun à bosser l'auto ça là pas plus que ça parce que il y a mettre sur l'auto ça là il y a peut contrôler l'auto ça là bas c'est ça situation ça là c'est ça qui fait le Parlement le même Sénat qui a joué ici tout à l'heure pour discuter et faire sa loi aussi si vous avez pour situation côté pour mettre distance à parmi monde ces chaises là qui c'est même Parlement c'est dans sous yo mettez à cette distance pour la partie top monde pour combler pour ça c'est un exemple qui a suivre en cas Parlement ça tout à l'heure nous avons que session qui a commencé ici cas Parlement supposé commencer depuis 8h30 et que session Sénat supposé commencer à 10h mais nous la casse pour regarder comment ça va aller à un petit moment les sœurs.
Thank you so much, Sam Primus. No, Primus, I know we mentioned earlier that we're seeing the social distancing happening in the chamber there, and we've been informed that what's going to happen to ensure that the compliance is done even at the state level. Just a quorum is now being allowed for both the lower house and upper house this morning. And so we'll be seeing 3 members of the opposite side in chamber today, as well as 5 members on the government side. And so they are ensuring that we are leading by example in order to have the rest of the nation understand the importance of social distancing at this time. We are now at just 2 minutes past 9 o'clock right here at the Saint Lucia House of Assembly, and we are awaiting the arrival of the Speaker of the House, as well as Prime Minister Honorable Alan Shastney. And once they arrive, we will be seeing the commencement of the session for this morning. We'll take a very quick break and we'll be back.
Wash them before
eating or handling food or caring for infants, sick or elderly people.
wash your hands. Wash them after.
Using the toilet, touching raw meat, handling pets and livestock, playing outdoors, cleaning or handling waste and garbage.
Wash your hands. Wash them often.
You are going right when you make a habit of washing your hands several times a day.
This message brought to you courtesy the Bureau of Health Education of the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
In December 2019, there was a cluster of pneumonia cases in China. Investigations found that it was caused by a previously unknown virus, now named the 2019 novel coronavirus. In this video, we'll take a quick look at what's currently known about the virus. Keep in mind that this is a new virus, and what's known about the virus now might change in the future. Coronaviruses are a large group of viruses. They consist of a core of genetic material surrounded by an envelope with protein spikes. This gives it the appearance of a crown. Crown in Latin is called corona, and that's how these viruses get their name. There are different types of coronaviruses that cause respiratory and sometimes gastrointestinal symptoms. Respiratory disease can range from the common cold to pneumonia, and in most people, the symptoms tend to be mild. However, there are some types of coronaviruses that can cause severe disease. These include the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, first identified in China in 2003, and the Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus that was first identified in Saudi Arabia in 2012. The 2019 novel coronavirus was first identified in China. It initially occurred in a group of people with pneumonia who'd been associated with a seafood and live animal market in the city of Wuhan. The disease has since spread from those who were sick to others, including family members and healthcare staff. There are many cases at present, and the disease has spread within China and also to a number of other countries. So, where did the virus come from? It's known that coronaviruses circulate in a range of animals. Sometimes these viruses can make the jump from animals to humans. This is called a spillover and could be due to a range of factors such as mutations in the virus or increased contact between humans and animals. For example, MERS-CoV is known to be transmitted from camels and SARS-CoV from civet cats. The animal reservoir of the 2019 novel coronavirus is not known yet. How is it transmitted? The exact dynamics of how the virus is transmitted is yet to be determined. In general, respiratory viruses are usually transmitted through droplets created when an infected person coughs or sneezes, or through something that has been contaminated with the virus. People most at risk of infection from the novel coronavirus are those in close contact with animals, such as live animal market workers, and those who are caring for people infected with the virus, such as family members or healthcare workers. So, how does the disease present? Well, from what is known so far, there can be a number of symptoms ranging from mild to severe. There can be fever and respiratory symptoms such as cough and shortness of breath. In more severe cases, there's been pneumonia, kidney failure, and death. The mortality rate is not known yet. How can we tell whether someone is infected? The infection can be diagnosed by a test called PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. This test identifies the virus based on its genetic fingerprint. There's currently no specific medication for the virus, and treatment is supportive care. There's currently no vaccine to protect against the virus. Treatment and vaccines are in development. How do we prevent transmission of the virus? This new virus currently has a limited geographic spread. However, there are a number of standard hygiene practices that have been recommended to protect against infection and further spread. These include covering your mouth and nose when coughing or sneezing with a medical mask, tissue, or flexed elbow, avoiding close contact with those who are unwell, the appropriate use of masks and personal protective equipment, especially in a healthcare setting, washing hands regularly with soap and water, or alcohol-based hand rub. Actions that can be taken to prevent infection from an animal source include avoiding unnecessary unprotected contact with animals, washing hands after contact with animals or animal products, and ensuring that animal products are cooked thoroughly before they're consumed. It's important to stay home if you're feeling unwell, but if you have a fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical care early and share your previous travel history with your healthcare provider. That's a quick look at this emerging infectious disease. Given that this outbreak is evolving rapidly, what's known about this virus can change. Please check the websites below for the most up-to-date information.
There are several measures you can adopt to protect yourself and others from getting the new coronavirus. Frequently clean your hands by using an alcohol-based hand rub product like a gel, or wash your hands with soap and water. When coughing and sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with flexed elbow like this, or use a tissue. If you use a tissue, discard it immediately into a closed bin. Avoid close contact with anyone that has fever and cough. And if you have fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical care early and share information about any recent travels with your healthcare provider. If you just have mild respiratory symptoms and no specific travel history, carefully follow the precautions I just explained and make sure you stay home until recovery. If you need more information on how to protect yourself from the new coronavirus, check the WHO website at who.int.
It's power bike time!
Hey, you need to cover your mouth. Don't you know about the coronavirus?
It's not a joke, it's a serious thing.
True that. What's coronavirus anyway?
The coronavirus is a group of viruses that causes the common cold. In more severe cases, it's like the flu.
Really? So are you saying that this is not a new virus?
No, it isn't new. It's a new strain. That's why some people say novel coronavirus. Yes, look at it like a family who just had a new baby.
I get it now. So how is it spread?
Through the air, like coughing and sneezing, touching objects, surfaces with the virus on it, touching your face, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, before washing your hands with running water and soap.
Sounds like someone has the flu or the cold. Are the symptoms the same?
The symptoms are fever, coughing, sneezing, headaches, just like the flu. In some severe cases, you also have breathing difficulties and chest pains. Some persons also get pneumonia and kidney failure, and as you have heard the news, some people have died.
Wow. So how do I protect myself?
We have always been told to wash our hands with running water and soap. In the event there is no running water and soap, you use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer of at least 70% alcohol. Try your best to avoid touching your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. And in the event you need to sneeze and cough into a tissue, you throw the tissue into a bin. If you do not have tissue and you need to sneeze or cough, you do it into your elbow.
Yes, I heard that. So what medications can we take?
Well, as the virus is new, there is no medication or vaccine that you could really take to prevent it. What we really have to do is to practice infection control measures to protect ourselves.
Hey, people. I need to get a sweat. Let's get moving.
Let's do it, guys.
So, wait, how do I get more information?
Good, I have that number on lockpad. For further information, contact the Bureau of Health Education at 468-5349, 468-5347, or 468-5342.
Let's defy limits!
Woo! Come on!
Personal risk reduction is important. Germs are everywhere, and you can reduce your risk of infection by practicing some basic infection control measures. Taking the stairs, avoid touching the railing. If taking the elevator, ensure you use hand sanitizer immediately after exiting the elevator. Hand sanitizers with 60% or more alcohol are great to use, so have some readily available on your desk for quick use. Have your own personal bottle to carry with you when away from running water and soap. Germs can spread easily and be anywhere. Be sure to wipe down or disinfect desks, telephones, and keyboards. Washing your hands often will reduce the spread of germs, but you must wash them as recommended. Masks and gloves serve a purpose and provide protection when used in the recommended settings and when used correctly. They are not practical for the office or business place and can lead to the further spread of germs when used badly. Use only if you are coughing and or sneezing or taking care of someone who is ill with flu-like symptoms. For more information, call the Ministry of Health and Wellness at 468-5347, 468-5349, or 468-5350.
Thank you, Tariq. And good afternoon, everyone. In the past week, we have seen a rapid escalation of cases of COVID-19. More cases and deaths have now been reported in the rest of the world than in China. We have also seen a rapid escalation in social distancing measures like closing schools and cancelling sporting events and other gatherings. But we have not seen an urgent enough escalation in testing, isolation, and contact tracing, which is the backbone of the response. Social distancing measures can help to reduce transmission and enable health systems to cope. Hand washing and coughing into your elbow can reduce the risk for yourself and others. But on their own, they're not enough to extinguish this epidemic. It's the combination that makes the difference. As I keep saying, all countries must take a comprehensive approach. But the most effective way to prevent infections and save lives is breaking the chains of transmission. And to do that, you must test and isolate. You cannot fight a fire blindfolded, and we cannot stop this pandemic if we don't know who is infected. We have a simple message for all countries: test, test, test. Test every suspected case. If they test positive, isolate them and find out who they have been in close contact with up to 2 days before they developed symptoms, and test those people too.
And we are live in the Parliament chamber, and we are waiting the arrival of the Speaker of the House, as well as Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chasley. They are here, however, perhaps down in the official offices. As we indicated earlier, the social distancing, it's being practiced, and today what we'll be seeing is a quorum of the Parliament, where we'll be seeing 3 opposition members and 5 members of the government in the chamber. And so now we can see for certain that Honorable Stevenson King is here, Honorable Sarah Flood Bober is here, Honorable Bradley Felix, as well as Honorable Edmund Estefan is here. We see Honorable Philip G. Pierre, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, as well as Honorable Moses Jean-Baptiste, and in here as well. Dialogue, they're now having dialogue with the Attorney General, Stephen Julian. We're not anticipating a full chamber today at all, or rather in the gallery, I should say, Primus. We're not anticipating, and that we'll be seeing people flocking to the gallery, given the limit that there is for social gatherings here at this time. We're seeing some activity outside of the chamber, with the expectation that perhaps the Speaker of the House, as well as the Honorable Prime Minister, may be making the entrance at any moment now.
Gouvernement, Honorable Sarah Flood Bober, Honorable Stevenson King, Honorable Edmund Estefan, Honorable Bradley Felix, side opposition, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, Honorable Sean Edward, et Moses Jean-Baptiste, association opposition. Bon, quand nous t'ai dit tout à l'heure là, pour chaîne ça qui est nécessaire pour quitter distance entre tout le monde, et c'est là, au cas où qui a dansé même la chaise par côté, c'est supposé naturellement, ils mettent dans cette distance pour faire assurer que le monde ne pas trop pour dans l'autre chamber, peut-être le monde qui pour assister à cette manière, pas qu'il y ait des gens aussi, mais pas personne. Comme on a dit ça, Premier ministre Honorable Alan Chasley a tué après ça, nous avons une session et puis les médias tenu dans un moment à questionner. Alors nous croyons que dans un petit moment session était supposée commencer à 8h30 au matin major appointee officer nukakweki ada comme Premier ministre la handida session sala kay commencer ada timum après ça nous kay fi lissa kay continuer ba wa boss.
Yes, Prime Minister, we did see the entrance there of Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chasney. However, he is having some sort of conference dialogue there with the Minister of Responsibility for Foreign Affairs, Honorable Sarah Flood-Bovra. An exchange of documents taking place at this time. We could also see that the Speaker of the House, well, his desk is being prepared by a member of the Clerk of Parliament office, and any moment now it will look that we're now seeing the Sergeant at Arms is coming in doing a check to ensure that all is in order. Entering now is the Honorable Dr. Gail Rigobert. She has now made an entrance, and we've been signaled there by the Sergeant at Arms that we are indeed having a start right now. And so all that's left to be done at this time is for the official announcement of the Speaker of the House. And at that point, of course, the commencement of the proceedings. Also to inform Primers that while we are having just a quorum in here in the chamber, the full-fledged, all of the members of Parliament are here, but of course practicing the social distancing. As with some will be in the chamber, others will be outside of the chamber to ensure safety and to really accede to the protocol of social distancing. Just a lot of activity here, and it's quite interesting watching the flurry of activity on the floor, the conversations taking place amongst the members of Parliament. And you can see that the dialogue is intense, lighthearted at some points, but certainly what is happening today is of absolute significance for St. Lucians. In my lifetime, Primus, and this is to speak about the significance of what's happening today, I have not known St. Lucia to be under a state of emergency, not to memory. So I know perhaps you can speak to whether you have experienced or witnessed St. Lucia having to have a state of emergency declared.
Not that I can recall, but I'm thinking perhaps 1979, I'm not sure. When there was this sort of uprising, you can remember the Plywood City incident. They may have been, I'm not sure, I stand corrected, but things did went this haywire.
So at that time there was a lot of social unrest, civil disobedience?
There was civil disobedience. I think the riot police or the SSU was dispatched, and there were people marching up to the government house, and we're about to.
Acknowledge you to be our God. We thank you, God, as people. The many blessings, of God, that you have showered upon us. When we look around at the praises of God, You have favored us a lot, oh God. So as people, we give you thanks. We thank you for our leaders from both sides, oh God. How they have teamed up, oh God, to make sure your people are safe. And Lord, we want to thank you for our leaders. We pray this morning as they come together, oh God, to take decisions that will help our nation to progress. We commit this gathering into your hands, oh God. The Bible says, unless you build the house, those who labor, they labor in vain. Unless you watches over the city, the watchmen, they watch in vain. And therefore, Lord, we commit every aspect of our nation in your hands, especially these critical times, of God, as they are going to take decision. We ask, of God, for your wisdom, your knowledge, your guidance, of God, that you guide them, of God, to make right decision to the glory and honor of your holy name. We know this crisis, of God, will bring economic hardship upon our nation. But we know that, Lord, you make a way where there seems to be no way. So you are going to give our leaders the wisdom, the guidance of God to be able to steer everything of God to the glory of your name. We thank you, God, for our work, health personnel. We thank you, the security officers, how they are working, oh God, to make sure there is peace in our nation. So as your people gather this morning, Lord, we ask, oh God, that you grant them wisdom, that, Lord, they will do everything according to your will, so that, Lord, everything will be done to the glory and honor of your holy name, O God. We pray, O God, that grant them that, Lord, they do away with any partial affection, O God, prejudices, and result of all counsel may be to the glory of thy holy name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public will, peace, and tranquility of Saint Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the heart of all persons and estate within the same God, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his light of countenance upon you and give you peace.
Good morning, honorable members. Let me thank you for recognizing and accepting the need for us to practice that which we're preaching out there, that social distancing is a new phenomenon which is now affecting us here in Parliament. I would like to thank the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition for agreeing to reducing the numbers in the House, and for us to at least have a quorum that we may proceed with the business of the people. Let me also say that as time goes by, we'll be, as a Parliament, we need to reassess, be it our procedures, our processes, because if this crisis continue, we will have to see whether it is through Zoom, whether we have to amend our standing orders quickly, but we'll have to see how we could ensure that we, as a Parliament, continue to work. So thank you very much for understanding our situation and for putting it into practice. Statement by ministers. motions. Honorable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. And whereas under Section 3.1 of the Emergency Powers Disasters Act, Cap 1407, entitled the Act, it is provided that the minister responsible for disaster preparedness and prevention may, where the Governor General declares that a state of emergency exists for the purpose of Chapter 1 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, and so long as the proclamation is in force, make orders securing the essentials of life to the community and for the preservation of health, welfare, and safety of the public. And whereas it is further provided under Section 32.2 of the Act that orders may, under Section 3 of the Act, may, without prejudice to the generality of the power conferred, provide, A, for the requisitioning of all forms of transport and communications. B, the requisitioning and regulating the supply and the distribution of food, clothing, water, fuel, light, and other necessities of life, and for fixing maximum wholesale and retail prices in respect thereof. C, for requisitioning of private lands, buildings, and premises. D, for conferring on any person the right of entry or passage through or over of private lands, buildings, or premises. For the demolition of any building or other structure deemed to be dangerous. Or F, for the disposal of the dead and the dispensing with inquiries under the Coroners Act and from provisions of Civil Code of St. Lucia, Cap 4.01, in relation to records of birth and burials. And whereas it is further provided under Section 3.3 of the Act that orders may under Section 3 shall be laid before the House of Assembly and the Senate as soon as may be after they are made and shall be subject to the affirmative resolution of the Senate and the House of Assembly. And whereas the Governor General by proclamation declared a state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 and COVID, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19. And whereas the minister responsible for preparedness and prevention seeks the approval of the draft emergency powers disasters COVID-19 order by an affirmative resolution of Parliament to reduce the spread of COVID-19 that provides for A, the declaration of a quarantine facility to isolate persons with COVID-19. B, the detention of persons with COVID-19. C, the imposition of restrictions and requirements on persons with COVID-19. D, the isolation of persons suspected to be infected with COVID-19. E, the screening requirements for persons with COVID-19. F, the requisition of a building, ship, aircraft, or article. G, the requisition of an essential service. H, the waiver of procurement rules. I, the reporting requirements. J, the revocation or suspension of permits for the use of public open spaces. K, the prohibition of assembly of persons. L, the imposition of social distancing or isolation. M, the imposition of a curfew. N, the restriction of access to an area. O, the power to stop, detain, and arrest a person. P, the publication of false statements. And Q, the authorization of international or regional forces. Be it resolved that the Parliament approves the draft Emergency Powers Disasters COVID-19 order by an affirmative resolution of Parliament to reduce the spread of COVID-19 to provide for A, declaration of quarantine facility to isolate persons with COVID-19, the detention of persons with COVID-19, C, the imposition of restrictions and requirements of persons with COVID-19. D, the isolation of persons suspected to be infected with COVID-19. The screening of requirements for persons with COVID-19. F, the requisition of a building, ship, aircraft, or article. G, the requisition of an essential service. H, the waiver of procurement rules. I, the reporting requirements. J, the revocation or suspension of permits for the use of public open spaces. K, the prohibition of assembly of persons. L, the imposition of social distancing or isolation. M, the importation of a curfew, and, my apologies, the imposition of a curfew. N, the restriction of access to an area. O, the power to stop, detain, and arrest a person. P, the prohibition of the publication of false statements. So, Mr. Speaker, the welfare and the safety of the community in case of hurricane, earthquake, fire, flood, or any other disaster is provided for under the Emergency Powers Disasters Act, Cap 1407. According to the Section 3.1 of the Act, the minister responsible for disaster preparedness and prevention may make orders securing the essentials of life to the community and for the preservation of health, welfare, and safety of the public. However, the minister can only make the orders if the Governor General, by proclamation under Section 17 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, declares that a state of emergency exists for the purposes of Chapter 1 of the Constitution on the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms. A proclamation declaring a state of emergency was in fact published on the 23rd of March as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020. As such, the minister is now using the power under Section 3.1 of the Act to make orders for preserving the health, welfare, and safety of the public. Section 3.2 of the Act states that errors that may be considered in the orders made under that section. These include orders for requisitioning transport, communications, food, clothing, water, fuel, light, and other necessities of life, private lands, buildings and premises. Other matters that may be dealt with under the orders made under Section 3.2 of the Act are the ability to give a right of entry on or over private lands, buildings or premises, demolition of buildings, and the disposal of the dead. Before an order can be made under the Act, an affirmative resolution of the Parliament must be obtained. This means that the orders will not have force of law unless Parliament approves the order before it is enacted. Therefore, the Minister submits the Draft Emergency Powers Disasters COVID-19 order, the draft order, for the approval of Parliament today. The draft order contains 25 sections. It is expected that the draft order will come into effect on publication in the Gazette. In the draft order, there are definitions for the words child, competent authority, who is the Prime Minister, and COVID-19. The draft order states that the order has effect if it is inconsistent. Let me repeat that again. The draft order states that the order has effect if it is inconsistent with any existing law. Further, it allows for the declaration of a quarantine facility that will house persons who must be isolated to reduce the spread of the infection COVID-19. A person who is infected or contaminated with the COVID-19 may be detained in accordance with the draft order for the purposes of screening, assessment, and the imposition of restrictions or requirements by the Chief Medical Officer. The isolation of persons suspected to be infected with COVID-19 is also addressed in the draft order. Consequently, the Chief Medical Officer may require a person to be kept in isolation if the Chief Medical Officer has reasonable grounds to believe that a person is or may be infected or contaminated with COVID-19, and it is necessary to isolate the person to reduce or remove the risk of the person infecting or contaminating other people. There are screening requirements in the draft order that include the requirement for persons to answer questions and to provide travel history, as well as to produce health information that would assist the Chief Medical Officer in making an assessment. If there is a child involved, a responsible adult is provided with the ability to act on behalf of the child.
There are two motions. I think what has happened is that the Prime Minister and leader of government business is dealing with motion 2 instead of motion 1. So what has happened is he's done a reverse of the other paper, but it's still motions before motion 1. Yeah. Continue, sir.
Just to understand and appreciate, we have two motions today that are both related. And they're not, you don't have to pass one in order to be able to pass the other. And so I apologize, Mr. Speaker, if in fact I inadvertently took the second one first. But as I indicated to you and also to the Leader of the Opposition, I certainly only going to intend to give explanatory notes on the two put together. Certainly when the other one comes up, if there's questions, I'm very happy to be able to answer them at the point. But the fact is the two are intrinsically tied with each other.
Honourable Member, you're making a point?
Mr. Speaker, we don't really want to sound obstructionist, but I mean, one would believe you have to do the declaration, which then gives you the power to approve the order. But you're going to approve the order, and then after you're going to approve the declaration, that gives you the right to issue the order. But, you know, I'm not a lawyer. Like we've said, we want to give the government space to do it the way they think they should do it. But that just sounds a little back to front. But proceed, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've gotten a clarification from the Attorney General to basically remind us that the Governor General's proclamation is what takes precedence. And in fact, what we're doing is giving effect to that proclamation in order to be before. So it can be either one can come. It's not required for them to be sequential. But again, for further clarification, what my intention is to do this morning is to give briefing notes to encompass both of them. And certainly, if in fact we want to have a separate debate on the second one, I'm happy to do it that way as well, Mr. Speaker. There are screening requirements in the draft order that include the requirement for persons to answer questions and provide travel history, as well as to produce health information that would assist the Chief Medical Officer in making an assessment. If there is a child involved, a responsible adult is provided with the ability to act on behalf of the child. Powers are given to the competent authority, the Prime Minister, to requisition a building, vessel, aircraft, and essential services. One of the essential services that will be continued is a service at ports of entry, but these services will only be maintained for cargo handling and to accommodate persons who are leaving Saint Lucia. There are also powers in the draft order to waive procurement rules and waive fees for testing and medical services. The Ministry of Health must give reports with respect to COVID-19 during the continuance of the emergency in accordance with the draft order. In the draft order, there are also provisions for the revocation or suspension of permits. for use of public open spaces, prohibition of assembly of persons, and the imposition of social distancing and isolation. The competent authority, the Prime Minister, is also empowered under the draft order to set curfews during which time persons are expected to stay indoors. The draft order also provides restrictions on access to certain areas in compliance with an order made by the competent authority. A police officer or person authorized by the competent authority has the power to stop, detain, and arrest a person who contravenes the draft order. Additionally, the draft order prohibits the obstruction of the chief medical officer, public officer, police officer, or person exercising a function under the draft order. The publication of false statements is also prohibited in the draft order. The Governor General is authorized to request assistance from international or regional military or police forces as peace officers to provide essential services or maintain public peace. The ways that an order may be communicated is stated in the draft order and includes by announcements using various media, including radio and television, and providing notices at the district court or police station and on the government website. However, an order made under the draft order must be subsequently published in the Gazette. There is a general penalty in the draft order which echoes the sanction that may be imposed under Section 3(4) of the Act, namely imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term of 6 months or a fine of $1,000. The draft order becomes ineffective once the declaration of the state of emergency is revoked. It therefore only has effect during the period of the state of the emergency. Mr. Speaker, as we know, this is an unusual time, and more importantly, this was a time that literally took the world by surprise and has caused us to take some extreme actions in order to be able to protect the health and the safety of our citizenry. I think that a very important component of this crisis, Mr. Speaker, that also cannot be forgotten and underestimated. And while measures like social distancing and isolation and quarantine are critical to reducing the rate of COVID-19 spread, so as not to overwhelm our medical system. And we've gone to great lengths, and not only here in Saint Lucia, but globally, where people talked about flattening the curve. What flattening the curve means, Mr. Speaker, is attempting to make sure that if in fact we are going to have a community spread in Saint Lucia, it's done that the numbers are not going to overwhelm the medical facilities. What we have seen very sadly, Mr. Speaker, in Italy, is that a number of people who have died are really people who died not because the technology or the capacity to resolve the problem was not available, but the access to nurses and to the respirators was inadequate. And therefore we hear the horrific stories, Mr. Speaker, and I want to say them, because while we have not experienced them here, as human beings, they must touch us. But when we hear stories of our parents being in isolation, not being attended to, and in fact having to die alone, and family members are not even given permission, Mr. Speaker, to be able to go and meet them. I know in our culture how difficult that would be, Mr. Speaker. And we must do everything that we can to avoid that being repeated here in Saint Lucia. We are particularly concerned about, in my government, the mental health of individuals in quarantine. Individuals who are already having issues with illness such as anxiety, depression, panic attacks, substance abuse, and other health problems may be especially vulnerable during this time. And I think it's important, Mr. Speaker, that we again appreciate the fact that COVID does not discriminate. COVID doesn't attack people who are strong. COVID doesn't care what your age is. COVID doesn't care what your ethnicity is. COVID doesn't care what your religious preferences are. And COVID doesn't care whether you are mentally prepared to deal with this or not. It randomly selects people. And so you may find persons with weak mental state that are now forced into isolation in order to be able to protect the cumulative good of society. And that we have to be able to be cognizant of that, Mr. Speaker. Older individuals may be more susceptible to the ill effects of isolation and loneliness, particularly those with chronic illness. Mindful of this, and within days, a dedicated hotline will be established specifically to support persons in quarantine. Speaker, I particularly want to thank Minister Sarah Flood, Minister Mary Isaac, as well as Minister Leonard Montoute, who I've asked to lead this charge in specifically making sure this aspect of COVID is not forgotten. And I want to thank them for their work and look forward to the implementation of the hotline and also instructions to family members how to deal with loved ones who are in isolation, and that continue to make phone calls to them and to give them support. So, Mr. Speaker, this crisis has led to many draconian changes in our lives. And sadly, because it's so fluid, there are multiple times, Mr. Speaker, that my cabinet have met in an afternoon, and by the evening, what we did has already been made obsolete. That's how quick it's changing. And so therefore, these emergency authority gives the government the capacity to move more fluidly. If in fact we have to be able to put price control changes in effect, and we had to do it the traditional way, Mr. Speaker, we would go to cabinet to get the approval, wait for 2 weeks, even though you could potentially do an early release, come to cabinet, to Parliament, and in Parliament we have to do both the sittings of the lower house and the upper house, Mr. Speaker. The time that would lapse, a lot of people would have suffered in the meanwhile. This act, what we're passing today, would give the Prime Minister the authority to immediately make those price control changes, and simply would follow it up with notices to the public, including the gazetting of what those changes are. But the effect is immediate. And there are many more instances, Mr. Speaker, in which the state having that kind of authority to act immediately would save lives, and certainly ultimately down to the benefit of the cumulative society. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'm saying that these are only laws. That's all these are. In order to give effect to these laws, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping the other side would join me in saying we need cooperation. And sadly, the amount of resources that we have had to engage, particularly at the police level, to do things that we thought that the general public, Mr. Speaker, would have appreciated as being to their benefit, that they would have been more cooperative. And I'm appealing once more to the general public. Our public officers, and particularly our policemen and our nurses, are exposing themselves. And I'm really hoping that the public will participate, and also to know that what they're doing is to be able to help themselves. I also want to thank, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition. We have been engaging, and even on today, I shared with him prior to coming to the House yesterday our explanatory notes, and I want to thank him and his side for their contributions in the amendments that we made, and I think that the Attorney General had accommodated those amendments, but certainly if he has any further amendments today, we're here to be able to pass a very significant piece of legislation. I also want to, Mr. Speaker, to thank a couple of people. I want to thank the government of Cuba and the people of Cuba, who have graciously agreed to provide us with, I think it's 128 doctors and nurses My understanding is that they're going to be flying in here on Friday and are going to be specifically helping us with the respiratory hospital that we're putting at Victoria, as well as to give us support in our transition at OKEU. And very important component of that, Mr. Speaker, was the government and the people of Cayman Islands, who graciously offered us a plane for free to be able to transport those people to Saint Lucia. And these are the kinds of actions, Mr. Speaker, that really give us hope in mankind. And I just really want to highlight those two individuals. I've also seen, Mr. Speaker, several business houses in here donating money, donating equipment, and donating time to be able to give us support during this very trying time. At a later date, Mr. Speaker, this week, I'm hoping to be able to highlight our economic stabilization program for COVID-19. And I certainly will continue my practice of sharing those ideas and thoughts and getting the input of the opposition. And also, as far as the implementation, that will continue to go through NEMAC before we actually institutionalize anything or make anything active. So again, I'm looking forward to the support of my colleagues and to reassure St. Lucians that both the government and the opposition are working collectively together in order to be able to get us through these incredibly difficult times, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament approves the draft Emergency Powers Disaster COVID-19 order by an affirmative resolution of the Parliament to reduce the spread of COVID-19 to provide for A, the declaration of a quarantine facility to isolate persons with COVID-19, B, the detention of persons with COVID-19, C, the imposition of restrictions and requirements on persons with COVID-19, D, the isolation of persons suspected to be infected with COVID-19, E, the screening requirements of persons with COVID-19, F, the requisition of building, ship, aircraft or article, G, the requisition of an essential service, H, the waiver of procurement rules, I, the reporting requirements, J, the revocation or suspension of permits for use of public open spaces, K, the prohibition of assembly of persons, L, the imposition of social distancing and or isolation, M, the imposition of a curfew and the restriction of access of an area, O, the power to stop, detain, and arrest a person, P, the prohibition of the publication of false statements, and Q, the authorization for international or religion forces. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are living in extraordinary times. Extraordinary times that not even the people with the most wisdom, people with the most experience would have ever thought that we would go through. Really extraordinary times, and extraordinary times dictate that we take extraordinary actions. The opposition has made it clear, and it is not the first time we have made it clear, that we do not want our country to fail. Contrary to some expressions, we don't want our country to fail. We've never, even in this crisis, even before the crisis, we do not want our country to fail. We have a point of view that we express. We have a point of view that we make known to the public, because it's our responsibility as an opposition to make that point of view be heard. But it's never a situation where we want our country to fail, where we want deliberately to impose hardship on the people, or where our intentions or our words mean that we want people to cry. We always believe that a country in a holistic fashion must advance, and all the people must advance. And the Prime Minister is right. I have spoken to the Prime Minister more in the last 2 days than I have spoken to him in the last 4 years. And I will say that in public, because we are in a crisis. We are in an extraordinary situation, and I guess that is why that is going to happen. But I'm sure that when things get back to normal, we get back to how we are generally. We come in here and we come in here and we do all sorts of things. We want people to cry. We say things that are damaging and hurtful. We impute all kinds of important power motives. But we are in extraordinary times. And this is why the opposition, even if we may have some concerns on the necessity of a state of emergency, we believe that there may be other acts that we could handle that crisis on. We gave our word, and I gave my word to the Prime Minister, I gave my word, and my colleagues have agreed that we will support these measures because we believe that we are living in extraordinary times. But Mr. Speaker, when these things happen, we cannot just sit down and agree and say hallelujah and move on. We have to look at what got us there. And it pains me when I hear the grief in the Prime Minister's heart when he says that Saint Lucians refuse to listen to things that will benefit them. We have to ask ourselves why. Why is there such distrust and mistrust and division in a country of 165,000 people? Why can people understand that prohibiting them from gathering in spaces is not because anybody hates them, it's because it is for their own health. And we use the phrase that, oh, we can't do anything about it, it happens in the United States. We can't change it because it happens anywhere in the world. Who would predict that would happen? Of course, we agree. But the fact is, we are a small country. And it's really painful. Because you say to somebody, listen to me, you have to exercise social distancing for your own health, for the health of yourself, for the health of your family, and they will not listen because they don't trust you. And that is what, as a people, we have to try to find out. Why is there such mistrust in this country? Why do people believe that if you give the Prime Minister the emergency powers that he is asking for in the regulations to save lives? Because the science has said that the way you combat COVID-19 is by causing people to stay away from other people. That is the basic science. The science if the science hasn't found anything, they found that. And people do not want to believe that. They think that there is some ulterior motive in the fact that we are saying to them that some of their rights, some of their customary freedoms are being stopped or halted, albeit temporarily. So that's supposed to be a time of reflection for our country, and it's a time where we, who believe we are also powerful, must say to ourselves that we are not that powerful, that we are only being asked to take custody over that power for a particular length of time. And all of us, that power will get out of our hands. So it's a really teaching moment. It's a moment of reflection, Mr. Speaker. And whereas we have to deal with the issues now, I really hope that when these issues are cleared, and I hope for our sake, and not for the sake of the Labour Party or the United Workers' Party, for the people's sake, that these issues are cleared. And whereas I'm dealing with the emergency powers, I really hope that we understand the plight, the mental plight, and the economic plight that some people are experiencing at this time. We have to put ourselves in their place. We have to think about this morning. I spoke to a lady who was in quarantine. She came from England and she's in quarantine. She lives comfortably. She has a comfortable house. She has no issues. And she literally was crying because she said that she was feeling like a prisoner. And I had to say to her, you are there because you have to protect me. She cannot understand what I was saying. I say you are there because you have to protect me. So that's the mental anguish that people are experiencing right now. So we cannot take it simply and lightly and believe that we can just say these things and pass these laws and don't give people the courage and the reassurance that when this thing is over, life should not be how it was before. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that in passing these rules and these regulations or that order, that we think of the economic problems and economic issues that will arise because of COVID-19. And I look forward to the package that the Prime Minister will bring to the public, because the opposition will make known its package, Mr. Speaker. And I want to make the point that when the opposition speaks on these issues, we are not trying to gain political points. That doesn't help us. It is our point of view and our protection for the people of Saint Lucia. That is why we make these pronouncements, and that is why we make our opinion known. Because we want the public to hear, listen to me, we have agreed that there's a crisis and we will support the people of Saint Lucia in this crisis. That is clear. But when we make our voices heard, we want to make our voices heard because the people must hear what we are saying. Because we have a point of view. And our point of view is not a point of view of destruction. Our point of view is a point of view where we want people to benefit. So, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has outlined why he wants the state of emergency. There's a body of thought. Some people say that there's no need for a state of emergency. But we have agreed that because of the circumstances, we will take the Prime Minister's word for it, because basically the circumstances that exist in the country. But we hope, Mr. Speaker, that these measures and these laws that we are doing today, that order is handled in the spirit in which we are agreeing to it. We hope that it's not used for any motives. We really hope so. And probably it may not be from directives from the upper echelons of power in this country. It may be from surrogates. It may be from people who want to impress. It may be some people who have some financial gain that they want to impute all these motives towards the opposition. We hope that the way we've handled that people take it for what it's worth, Mr. Speaker. And not because we have absconded in our duties, but because we think that we have a crisis. And in a crisis situation where lives are involved, because the science is saying that if this thing goes unabated in this country, Mr. Speaker, hundreds of us will die. That is a fact. Hundreds. Italy, in the north of Italy, that had the best medical system, they say it's one of the best medical systems in Europe. Hundreds have died. Thousands have died. In the state of New York, New York is the epicenter now of COVID-19. New York is In New York, the great state of New York, where all St. Lucians want to run, now they want to come back. That is the state of the world today, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we've agreed that give the Prime Minister extraordinary powers. Even if there's a body of thought that says they were not necessary. But the opposition will cooperate, but the opposition is going to be vigilant. Because we know, Mr. Speaker, we know that is the best intentions in the world. There are some people who will use that opportunity to settle political points. We know that. We are sure, Mr. Speaker. We hope it doesn't happen, but we know that. That has been our experience. That any time the opposition supports something happening in the Parliament, last week, when we said, listen to me, we are supporting something because we made amendments, the Prime Minister accepted the amendments, there was the political backlash, the political spin, because it's just in their nature, Mr. Speaker. It's just in their nature, the nature to make people cry, just in their nature, Mr. Speaker. So we really hope that that's a different beginning to what we are accustomed to. So we support the orders, we support it. There are some reservations that these could happen under other laws, but we've taken the position that the situation is too grave. It's too grave so we err on the side of the health of the people of Saint Lucia. That is why if we make a mistake, it's for the health of the people of Saint Lucia. For this COVID-19 to be abated, because it's something that if it gets out of hand, we can't control, even though we try. With all the intentions, the best intentions in the world, we just cannot, if we do not flatten the curve, we will not be able to contain it. We can't. No, it's fooling ourselves. We have to flatten that curve. And if we do not flatten that curve and we do not contain it, what we are doing now, what we plan to do in the future, will be useless. Because there can only be an economy if there are people. There is no economy without people, Mr. Speaker. And this morning I was reading an article about, right now, the crisis is not the 2008 crisis, It's a different crisis. Because right now, there is no demand. There is no demand. There is no demand. So that's why the opposition is supporting these measures to protect people. And we hope that the people, we've given the mandate for the authority to take the measures that they deem fit based on the health requirements. We've agreed. We look forward to the economic packaging, the economic stimulus that the country will have to avoid people, Mr. Speaker, people from going through any further hardship. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Denrenor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the people of Denrenor to support the motion that is before us and to affirm the commitment of the parliamentary opposition to the motion as presented by the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, ours is a position that has been eloquently espoused by the leader of the opposition at least 3 times prior to today in the last week. And if you want to factor his presentation, which was concluded mere seconds ago, I think this is the 4th time I'm hearing the leader of the opposition
pledging support and pledging to work collaboratively with the government on a matter or situation that confronts our country. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to COVID-19, our country is at the crossroads. And the coronavirus-induced crisis, if not handled properly as we've seen in other parts of the world, we will be faced with a situation where disaster and calamity will consume hundreds of Saint Lucians, if not all of us. Mr. Speaker, we can quickly become overwhelmed by the situation. And although there has already been a reliance on our brothers and sisters from Cuba and elsewhere to help with the situation, I believe there are a number of things we can do for ourselves to help contain the spread of the coronavirus. Little things, Mr. Speaker, things that we've been spoken to about by the Bureau of Health Education: wash our hands, practice social distancing, refrain from spreading information that is not reliable. Very, very simple things. And I think the leader of the opposition was on point when he said, Mr. Speaker, and also the Prime Minister, that COVID-19 or the coronavirus does not select or choose classes or categories of people to infect. It is not concerned about gender. It is not concerned about age. It does not care about your political affiliation. And so, Mr. Speaker, the only way we can objectively combat this phenomenon is for all national patriotic hands to be on deck. This is not a time to play politics. This is not a time for us to posture and to flex the muscles of power that we have. Mr. Speaker, the responsibility belongs to all of us. And as one of the highest decision-making forums in this country, the eyes of the national community are fixed on the Parliament. And I don't think or believe that there's ever been a time in the history of this Parliament where our maturity will be placed under greater scrutiny. And it is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, whereas the political leader of the Saint Lucia Labour Party, member for Castries East, and leader of the opposition, has pledged our full support, now is the time for us to embrace each other's contribution and the positions that we assume on this national crisis. When we on this side postulate or prescribe certain approaches, Mr. Speaker, let the debate be one where we are only discussing contending ideas. Let it be a contest of ideas. Let it not descend into a personality thing. Because I'm sure all of us in here have constituents who are very apprehensive about the situation that is before us. Mr. Speaker, moi voulais prendre l'occasion, même comme leader opposition, pour dire que nous avons supporté des marches gouvernement à point pour essayer de contrôler ça nous a créé coronavirus. Et leader opposition, même comme le Premier ministre a dit, cette maladie, ça, c'est pas yon qui a choisi qui qualité moun qui a attaqué. Il a attaqué grand moun, jeune moun, femme, homme, il va mêler qui on est là, qui gosse caillou qui resté et ben qui côté un pays à au sorti. Et nous avons un pays dans cette liste, manière maladie ça a affecté gros pays qui n'a bon système santé. Juste yo, Mr. Speaker, quand il y a des difficultés, côté yo passe à contrôle maladie ça et puis yo ka acheter assistance ko yo ka joindre. Là il parle plus bonheur, Premier ministre l'a dit, that nous ka une assistance hors place contre Cuba pour aider nous à abattre situation. Ça c'est ba nous en les façades ça bienvenue. Ça c'est ba nous ka encourager. Et nous ka aussi dit, Mr. Speaker, that l'année pile là nous venir au Parlement et nous parler l'année tie mettait et c'est moun ka crier moun non et moun pas ka web qui point moun ka essayer faire. But depuis COVID-19 et puis coronavirus,
ça c'est un bon exemple, ça c'est un bon lait pour nous montrer peuple Saint Lucia que nous avons travaillé ensemble pour bénéfice toutes gens Saint Lucia. Because nous tous qui ici à Nimoun constituency nous Mr. Speaker, qui ni Perez, la Nimoun qui passe à qui manière pour aller about affaires pour quitter Koyo et puis famille safe. Mr. Speaker, this is not a matter for the Prime Minister and his cabinet only. The opposition must be allowed a place at the negotiating table, and not for decorative purposes to say at the end of the day that it was bipartisan and we had representatives of civil society organizations. But Mr. Speaker, most importantly, when the opposition is invited to the table, our contending points of views must be valued and respected for what they are. And I can tell you with all the sincerity that I can muster, that we have never, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, embraced or adopted a posture where we are about scoring political points. This is not a time for the politics, as I said, because there is a crisis on our doorstep. This is not a time for anybody to cry wolf. This is not a time to try and elicit sympathy for the things we probably would have done wrong in times gone. But instead, Mr. Speaker, we must all put our shoulders to the wheel, and we have to do whatever is necessary for the betterment and benefit of the people of Saint Lucia. But COVID-19 also provides us with an opportunity to engage in a bit of introspection. Yes, we have to be preoccupied with fighting the disease, night and day. But Mr. Speaker, we must always find a little moment to reflect and tell ourselves that perhaps some of the things we would have done in the recent past, upon reflection, probably could have been done differently. But that is for another debate. Mr. Speaker, you will permit me, of course, to highlight the impact that this particular phenomenon is having on communities. For instance, in my own community and constituency, Denry North, the people of Olio, Despin, Gadet, Larissus, La Pelle, Denny Riviere, like their counterparts in all other parts of Saint Lucia, Mr. Speaker, are extremely concerned about a full-scale outbreak of the coronavirus. In recent days, I have seen the apprehension and fear in the eyes of my constituents. I've heard the concerns in their voices. I've read the hundreds of text messages, and people are apprehensive. Lania Perez, c'est pas pour dire ça c'est un bail qui a fait en 1960s qui a espéré un mundo qui s'est fait. It is right there on the television screen, Mr. Speaker. They are seeing the scores of coffins being moved in military vehicles in Italy so that those bodies can be cremated as a means of minimizing the spread of the disease. And the Prime Minister made the point when he was on his feet. Just imagine, Mr. Speaker, your parents have been in isolation and quarantine. You're not allowed to visit. And the last thing you would have heard of your parents is that they have passed and you're not even allowed a funeral service or a proper burial. And as he quite rightly said, in our culture, just imagine people having to live with that particular reality. Just imagine, Mr. Speaker, that si maman ou papa ou ni COVID-19 ou coronavirus, et que vous passez à venir ouais, ou passez même aller à l'hôpital pour ouais, et que l'autre pour dire about maman ou papa ou issue ou fort, c'est un monde qui a crié pour dire il a mort. Mais pour empêcher disease la spread aussi mais ou passez même ni en letterment côté où ça tirer maman et papa. Vous avez point quoi après la mort et puis vous avez mené aller en machine armée et puis vous allez brûler body avec la seconde manière vous contrôler manière this is like a cement. Finally, Mr. Speaker, there's been a very unfortunate situation that has developed right adjacent to my constituency. And we are learning that people from Martinique, which is a country that is infected with the coronavirus, are infiltrating the country through the back door. And that the Louvet Beach, which is not too far away from Olio in my constituency, is one of the entry points for those persons in Martinique. ever since the demise of our banana industry, a lot of people from my constituency have resorted to a life in Martinique where they work very odd jobs, Mr. Speaker, to earn a living for themselves. And with all the panic that has been triggered by COVID-19 coronavirus, some of them are fleeing from Martinique and they are finding very creative means to enter. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity in this honorable house today to appeal to all my constituents and St. Lucians who have relatives in Martinique, who know that they are planning to enter the country through the back door, to let them know that they need to desist from doing that. Je voulais prendre l'occasion pour dire tout gens constituency moi. Et puis cette liste entièrement qui connaît moun gens yo et be famille yo qui Martinique qui veulent vivre cette liste. Pour dire just prendre un petit patience toujours et puis rester koyoye. Pas entrer pays through back door, through Louvette, through Fondor Beach et puis pièce l'autre beach en pays. Là yo fait ça Mr. Speaker, yo ka mettre plus moun en danger. Là yo quitter Martinique et yo venir qui aller la caille, yo ka mettre ici en danger. Yo ka mettre maman yo en danger. Yo ka mettre un whole community en danger. Je vais prendre l'occasion pour dire c'est moun qui Martinique aussi qu'on saque cette liste qui connaît moun qui en Martinique pour dire rester là espérer by ça gouvernement une manière pour contrôler maladie avant yo savoir entrer en pays ça. Mr. Speaker, I do not condone my constituents or any other St. Lucians entering through the back door and placing additional strain on a health system which is already overwhelmed. Mr. Speaker, but we must understand that in this time of crisis, people have a tendency to panic. And so we as the leaders, not only must we put the structures in place, but we must always show a bit of empathy and concern for the individuals who would have been displaced or the individuals who are exhibiting signs of anxiety. It is necessary to quarantine them, Mr. Speaker. This is new territory for a lot of them. And people act sometimes not because they are malicious or they're not law-abiding, but you must understand that there's a level of anxiety and panic that this COVID-19 coronavirus has triggered. And so I want to appeal to the authorities that whereas the quarantine is necessary, let us ensure that the people as much as possible are living in humane conditions and that their rights are not trampled upon. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of elderly people in my constituency and in St. Lucia generally, and in all of the opposition constituencies, as well as the constituencies that are led by members on the other side. We know how susceptible this can be for the elderly in our midst. And so, Mr. Speaker, very, very quickly, I want to appeal to family members, those who work at the call centers, those who travel the public buses, those who are still being defiant to the guidelines that are being preached by the Bureau of Health Education, Mr. Speaker, to ask them to conduct themselves in a way that they will not be putting their families at risk. And very, very lastly, Mr. Speaker, I saw something that happened in my own constituency where the parish priest, Father Raj, conducted a funeral which ordinarily would have had scores or hundreds of mourners, but the people were able to cooperate, and we had just a score inside the church, and I suspect this is how it will be for the coming days. So, Mr. Speaker, once again, I want to, as I said, reaffirm the commitment of the opposition to whatever guidelines, whatever posture that the government is going to assume. We have concerns, but today we will not play the role of obstructionists, and we really wish that all St. Lucians will cooperate with the authorities to ensure that we get some measure of control on the COVID-19 coronavirus situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just want to reassure members on the other side, like in my presentation this morning, there's no reference to politics. It's a crisis in which, again, I want to remind us that COVID does not discriminate, doesn't know the difference between political sides. And many of us have households in which, I know in my own constituency, that people sleep where one person is on one political side and the other person is on the other political side. And I've seen it within our own communities, that we've learned to live with those differences. And I will desist from making any reference to politics, Mr. Speaker. I also want to reassure members on the opposite side that long ago, weeks ago, that we invoked NEMO and NEMAC, and there's nothing that we are implementing that does not first go through NEMAC. And therefore, any policy recommendations are discussed at the NEMAC level in order to ensure how it is going to be put into effect. And the opposition's participation is enshrined in that. And certainly the practice that I have started of giving the leader of the opposition heads up on critical issues that are going to be arising in order to give him sufficient time and the other side sufficient time to digest those issues in order that they could make a meaningful contribution. That practice will continue. I certainly want to amplify what the member from Denry North said. And that is, and we knew it, Mr. Speaker, it's not that we are naive to the ways of our citizens. We knew the temptation that once Saint Lucians knew that they would have to be coming into quarantine when they came from Martinique, that people would find easier ways. And sadly, despite the fact that we have banned private boats from coming into our country, in order to make the job of the Marine Police easier, and especially now that we know that there's no ferry services, there should be no boats traversing in the channel between Martinique and Saint Lucia, other than the fishermen who are going out to fish and to provide food and particularly great protein for our citizens. And I'm pleading that please do not stretch the resources of our Marine Police. I'm appealing to you. That could be used to deal with other emergencies. The other thing is that this idea that a person believes that they can financially benefit from, let's call it what it is, smuggling somebody into St. Lucia illegally. How is it that that individual believes that they're going to isolate themselves or their family from the threat? Because when those individuals come here and probably hide for the first couple of days, are staying in a household. And I want to reiterate to St. Lucians how this disease spreads. It's through human contact. And what we're learning by the experience of other countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, is that people with high immune systems are the ones that are carrying the virus the most and are creating the greatest amount of infection. Why? Because they don't feel the symptoms. They themselves don't know that they are infected. And the simple act of socializing in each other's backyards, the simple act of going to work and not practicing social distancing, and again, those people who are lucky enough that the commercial or the government has deemed your activity to be essential, that you're going back to your home. And when you go back to your home, inadvertently may affect somebody in your home. And if that person in their home is going into the backyard and playing with other kids, so children themselves are transmitting the disease. This is why we're appealing to everybody to take a time out for 2 weeks and to prevent this from happening. But we clearly understand and appreciate that there are certain activities that must take place because we must eat. Somebody has to provide safety and security for us. The firemen must be on call. The ambulance drivers must be on call. The nurses must be on call. It is not to say that all of the other health crises that we have all of a sudden disappeared. This is why OKEU is going to be our normal hospital. And that Victoria now is going to be used specifically to deal with COVID. Because we know people still need to go for dialysis. Women are still having babies. Sadly, we suffer from a country of hypertension. And there are times in which people have to go to the hospital to be stabilized. So these things continue. But if we don't practice civil obedience under these circumstances, Mr. Speaker, it is going to make all the effort we're doing in vain. The huge economic toil that it's causing on people who are working in the hotel industry, who by both the act abroad and the act here are going to be out of a job, and more than likely will be questioning where that pay is going to come from. And that is the anxiety that we hope to be able to quell in the upcoming weeks. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to assure members on the other side of our full cooperation that we see this as a national issue that does not have any politics in it, and we will continue operating in that vein to be able to resolve this. But the member from Henry North is 100% correct when he says it requires everybody to participate, everybody to really genuinely understand that your actions are not are threatening you and are threatening your family and your loved ones. And I think the best advice that I've heard throughout this process, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly hopefully that we can adopt it as being the standard practice that we have in this country, that every day you should assume that you have corona. And therefore your interactions with people is cognizant that I have corona. Also that you must also say that the person that you're in contact with, that they have corona. And therefore you must distance yourself as if they do. But the singular most important issue here, Mr. Speaker, is for everybody to imagine one singular person that they love. And if there is more and you can't make the differentiation, to put in your mind who you love. And when you find yourself struggling to go through the protocols that are being asked of you, remember you're doing it for them. Remember that you're doing it for them. And how effective we are in doing this, Mr. Speaker, will certainly determine how quickly we can resolve the corona war. And as I indicated, there's two wars. There's a corona war and there's an economic war. But in terms of sequence, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear we must deal with the first one first, which is corona. Because if we don't resolve corona, then all of the economic stimulus programs that we want to put in place to be able to help people to make it through this global crisis will be in vain. Because if people have to remain in isolation, if people have to be quarantining themselves, then it's impossible to be able to stimulate the economy sufficiently to benefit all of the solutions. So I'm appealing to everybody, we must win this war. The quicker that we can win this war, the better it is. The only vaccine that is known to work so far is isolation, quarantine, social distancing. And social distancing must mean that you do not allow yourself to be used by corona to pass it on to anyone. And as I said, we don't know that we have it. Not everybody is going to be tested. So please act like you have it and do the responsible thing. So on that note, I end my presentation, and I thank the leader of the opposition and members on the opposite side, but more importantly, I also want to thank members on my side for their cooperation, the time that they've been putting in, the new Zoom cabinet meetings that we're having in terms of practicing what we're doing, and for their incredible support during these very difficult times.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament approves the draft Emergency Powers Disaster COVID-19 order by an affirmative resolution of Parliament to reduce the spread of COVID-19 to provide for A, the declaration of a quarantine facility to isolate persons with COVID-19, B, the detention of persons with COVID-19, C, the imposition of restrictions and requirements on persons with COVID-19, D, the isolations of persons suspected to be infected with COVID-19. E, the screening requirements for persons with COVID-19. F, the requisition of a building, ship, aircraft, or article. G, the requisition of an essential service. H, the waiver of procurement rules. I, reporting requirements. J, revocation or suspension of permits for use of public open spaces. K, the prohibition of assembly of persons. L, the imposition of social distancing or isolation. M, imposition of a curfew. N, the restriction of access to an area. O, the power to stop, detain, and arrest a person. P, the prohibition of the publication of false statements. And Q, the authorization for international or regional forces. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I beg to move the following motion. Motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 17(1) of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, that the Governor General may, by proclamation which shall be published in the Gazette, declare a state of emergency exists for the purpose of Chapter 1. And whereas it is further provided by Section 17(3) of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, that the declaration of emergency shall lapse. A, in the case of a declaration made when Parliament is sitting and at the expiration of a period of 7 days beginning with the date of publication of the declaration. And B, in any of the other case, at the expiration of the period of 21 days beginning with the date of publication of the declaration. Unless it has in the meantime been approved by resolutions of the Senate and the House. And whereas it is further provided by Section 17(6) of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, that a resolution of the Senate and the House passed for the purpose of Section 17 shall remain in force for 12 months, or such shorter period as may be specified in the resolution. And whereas the Governor General, by proclamation, declared a state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 COVID, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19. And whereas the declaration of the emergency is made when Parliament is sitting and will expire at the end of the period of 7 days beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, unless the declaration is approved by resolutions of the Senate and House. And whereas it is necessary to approve the declaration of the state of emergency that was published in Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 COVID, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, for the further period of 26 days, commencing from the 31st day of March 2020 and ending on the 26th day of 2020. Be it resolved that Parliament approves the declaration of the state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 nCoV, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, for a further period of 26 days, commencing from the 31st day of March 2020 and ending on the 26th day. Speaker, on the December 31st, 2019, the Chinese authorities led an investigation to determine the etiology of reported cases on pneumonia in Wuhan City, Hubei province of China. This led to the discovery of a new strain of coronavirus disease, COVID-19. COVID-19 is a coronavirus characterized with fever, cough, and chills. About 80 to 81% of the cases are mild. 14% severe and 4% critical. The fatality rate ranges from 2.1 to 2.9%. The majority of the cases which have conditions which include renal disease, heart failure, lung disease, and cancer. Does that mean, Mr. Speaker, is that people who suffer from those ailments already become much more vulnerable and susceptible to actually having a critical condition? This has since resulted in the World Health Organization Director General under the International Health Regulations 2005 regarding the outbreak of novel coronavirus COVID-19 in the People's Republic of China, a public health emergency of international concern. On Thursday, January 30th, the WHO advised all countries to ensure preparation for containment as they expect further international exportation of cases due to the increasing spread of the virus, and the risk to our region has been escalated from low to medium and now high. Based on the WHO report, there have been 292,142 confirmed cases of COVID-19, which has led to 12,784 deaths. In the region of the Americas, there are 19,685 confirmed cases, resulted in 252 deaths. In the Caribbean region, there have been cases of COVID-19, with Guadeloupe having the most confirmed cases of 51. Saint Lucia now has 3 confirmed cases of COVID-19. I'm also very happy to report, Mr. Speaker, that 2 of the cases, well, all 3 are imported, but 2 of those imported cases have now been exported back. So we currently only have 1 person with COVID. The first case was a UK citizen who was confirmed on Friday the 13th of March 2020. The second case, also of a UK citizen, was confirmed on Saturday the 14th of March 2020. Just yesterday, Monday the 23rd March, the third case was confirmed. This time, a person is a Saint Lucian who resided in the United States. In the circumstances, the Governor General exercised the power conferred under Section 17.1 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, and declared by proclamation that a state of emergency exists as a result of the occurrence of COVID-19 for the purpose of Chapter 1 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, which deals with the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms of all persons, including the right to personal liberty, assembly and association and movement. The proclamation was published on the 23rd of March 2020 in an extraordinary gazette of that same day as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020. As a result, Section 17.3 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, requires that if the declaration is made while Parliament is sitting, the declaration expires after 7 days. Therefore, the declaration passed on the 23rd of March 2020 will expire on the 31st of March 2020. However, Section 17.3 and 6 of the Constitution of Saint Lucia, Cap 101, also states that the period of the declaration must be approved by resolutions of the Senate and the House, and will remain in force for 12 months or shorter periods specified in the resolution. It is therefore necessary for Parliament to approve the declaration of state of emergency that was made by proclamation of the Governor General on 23rd of March 2020, which was published in the Gazette on that date as statutory instrument number 39 of 2020. An additional period of 26 days starting from the end of the effective date of the proclamation, which is the 31st of March 2020, and terminating on the 26th of April 2020, must be approved by Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, 2 very essential orders that needed to be implemented, Mr. Speaker, can only be done so through the Emergency Act. The first one is the curfew. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have recognized not only is there a public fear with regards to the health crisis, but there's also a public concern as to the enforcement and obviously the security of the country. And in the first instance, my government has, in consultation again with the Leader of the Opposition, decided to implement it from 11 o'clock at night until 5 o'clock in the morning. I am hoping, Mr. Speaker, that the recent experiences that we have seen with people's behavior and lawlessness to some extent, that we have learned our lesson, and hopefully through the appeal of myself, the appeal of the leader of the opposition, and the appeal of many of the other civil society leaders that we have in this country, that it will not be necessary to extend those hours, and that we're going to get the cooperation of everyone. So, Mr. Speaker, if in fact that we don't see the necessary behavior, then this proclamation gives the government the ability immediately to effect those changes in the times. The second thing that was very necessary that we could only accomplish through this proclamation, Mr. Speaker, is preventing St. Lucia nationals from coming home. So up until now, again, and I want to repeat this, we have never discriminated against citizenship. All of the cautions that we have put in are to say people who are coming from Italy or people who are coming from China and have been there within the last 2 weeks, that they would have to go into quarantine. We've never said, although some people have interpreted it, that we've said Italians or Chinese or Japanese or anybody else that are on the caution list. That's never been the case. It's been anyone who has come from those areas. But despite those kinds of cautions, St. Lucia nationals are always able to come home. Over this weekend, Mr. Speaker, we have realized exactly what member from Dennery North indicated, and I believe that the member from Castries East also highlighted, the number of St. Lucians who are in the tri-state area, who are now recognizing that it's the epicenter of the disease, and that they themselves now are looking to migrate back home. Now, we do not have a way of determining through APIS, the Advanced Passenger Information System, Mr. Speaker, what part of America somebody came from. It simply says that they came from the United States of America. And what we're seeing is the individuals, particularly nationals who are returning home, are coming from highly infected areas. And therefore, the risk that they have the virus is substantially greater. We've also seen, Mr. Speaker, the practice of people agreeing to do voluntary isolation or staying in their own home has not always worked. And like the member from Dennery North said, I too have gotten the phone calls from all the different constituencies as to how this person is out and people are panicking. And so therefore, it is prudent that the state make sure that they are now under quarantine, and it means that we have to provide supervision. Nurses as well as policemen. And if people are unwilling to do it, exactly what was said, that people are questioning their mind, why am I having to do this? And not understanding that you're doing it for your own health as well. Because if we let you out and you infect, it's going to come right back to you. We must keep St. Lucia safe. And so those are two instances in which the only way for us to achieve what we want to achieve, i.e., as of midnight last night, we are not accepting anyone coming back to St. Lucia. The only individuals or groups that would be allowed to come back to St. Lucia have to be under the explicit approval of the CMO, not even the Prime Minister. The CMO is the one who has to be able to give the approval of anyone wanting to come back, and she has to determine whether those reasons are warranted. So I do know that a special permission was given for the Cuban doctors coming in and nurses. But that is really her domain to be able to make those kinds of decisions. So again, it was necessary, and I'm very grateful to the Governor General in recognizing the urgency of the matter. And I'm also looking for the support of my colleagues in Parliament to endorse the proclamation and extending it until the end of April. And if in fact we need to extend the period, then it will require myself, the Prime Minister, to come back to the House to give a report on how we have conducted ourselves in the last 26 days and why we think we may need to extend it. But we believe in the first instance that the 30 days should be sufficient in order to provide the authority to the state to quickly deal with this crisis at hand, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament approves the declaration of the state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as statutory instrument number 49 of 2020, containing the declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 nCoV, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, for a further period of 26 days, commencing from the 41st day of March 2020 and ending on the 26th day of April 2020. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say that I want to place on record the appreciation and sometimes our concerns for the people on the front line of that battle. The nurses, the doctors, the medical personnel, also people we forget, Mr. Speaker, but the people who work at the hospital, the cleaners, the porters, the ward maids, the health aides, the people who are really at the front line of this struggle, because they are putting their lives at risk, they put in their families' life at risk, and they do it in a way that we must show appreciation. So I want to place on record our appreciation for these people, Mr. Speaker. And finally, Mr. Speaker, for the government and people of Cuba, for their courage in their adversity, the adversity that they now face, in that they are still under intense blockade, an intensive blockade, Mr. Speaker, an economic blockade which has been intensified. But they also have the courage and the humanity to reach out to Saint Lucia, Mr. Speaker, and to help us. I want to place that on record, Mr. Speaker. And also, even if the Cuban government is under that kind of pressure, they still have the strength and the courage to help us, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the emergency powers COVID order, we had some issues which we discussed, and I've seen it reflected in the bill, but they've been reflected. We had an issue about the prohibition of assembly, where people could be held indefinitely. That has been changed to 72 hours. We also were concerned about a child, a parent or a child, and it says that, I see the amendment in relation to the guardian. It did not include who the child, who was in charge of the child. But I see Section 4 has been changed. A person who is a parent or guardian in relation to a child must ensure. So the parent and the guardian have been included, Mr. Speaker. I know that we had a discussion on the religious institutions, which I have not seen reflected, but I'm sure it should be at the... Huh? What? So it can't change? The religious institutions. See what you change it. The religious religion, yeah. You're going to change it now? Yeah, yes, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, so, be it as it may, we have made our position clear that serious times, serious decisions are taken, and we hope that the spirit that the opposition mention is kept, Mr. Speaker. So it is because of the position that we're in that the opposition is taking that position as it refers to the SOE, because of the extraordinary circumstances that we find ourselves in. Basically, we were trying to avert a crisis, a health crisis, is our position. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Castries South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just a couple of points which I think we need to make. And the first one, for the record, Mr. Speaker, that I think the Prime Minister mentioned that he shared his note to the Leader of the Opposition. We also sent a letter to the Prime Minister indicating some of the issues we had, as the Leader of the Opposition said, with the order paper. But we also had an issue with the procedure used for this motion, Mr. Speaker, based on legal advice we had. For us, and I think the Prime Minister said it in his notes, that the Governor General shall issue a proclamation, and if Parliament does not meet, it lapses after 7 days. But if Parliament meets, which Parliament is supposed to do to approve, as we are doing, and the wording here is clear, that Parliament, and whereas it is necessary to approve the declaration of state of emergency, so it is necessary that it is approved. And when Parliament meets to approve it, Mr. Speaker, it sets a date. And we believe, because there's a proviso that says, unless in the meantime the House and the Senate meet. So we believe, Mr. Speaker, that whereas the Governor General issued a proclamation, if within 7 days the House did not meet, then it would lapse. But if the House now meets and approves it, Mr. Speaker, the date can be set. So if there is an intention for it to be until April 31st, the wording of the SI could have simply said, for a period ending on the 26th day of April. Or it could have said for a period of how many days commencing today, meaning that the declaration from the GG would have lasted one night. Now, the AG says he disagrees with our interpretation. We're not going to argue, debate about it, before the record to say we have a different interpretation of how this should be followed, including practice in other Caribbean islands. But again, Mr. Speaker, we will not pursue that. And the reason why we're not pursuing that, Mr. Speaker, is important, is because, and I think it's important for the record, we state that, and for the people of Saint Lucia to understand our position. We don't agree with everything the government is doing, but we do not believe at this time we should be sending signals of political fighting and partisan fighting in the House. We are giving the government all the space to pursue its course of action as best as it sees. And although we may not be in support, or we may not be in agreement, we are not going to engage in a political fight with the government. We are giving the government all the space needed. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Prime Minister says that everything is agreed in NEMAC. I attended a NEMAC meeting, and I know there was a subsequent one. I cannot recall that a state of emergency was agreed to by NEMAC. If NEMAC agreed to a state of emergency, we were probably not there at that time, but he says NEMAC agrees with everything. I agree it's a dynamic process and decisions have to be made, but if you say that everything is agreed to by NEMAC, that may not essentially be true. But, Mr. Speaker, the most important point for me, Mr. Speaker, is that we have said, and the Leader of the Opposition said it, that there is a strong body of opinion that we do not need a state of emergency, that every power in the orders can be found under the Public Health Act and under the Quarantine Act, including the notion of restricting movements of people. And I think there is a section 9(1)(b), that can provide for limiting the movement of people. But the government decided it wants a state of emergency. Again, like we said, we're giving the government all the space to do what's necessary. But a state of emergency is a very serious set of powers to give a competent authority. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we want to give the people of Saint Lucia the assurance that we will be extra vigilant to make sure that there are no abuses under the state of emergency. The Prime Minister has given the assurance in this House, but we have a responsibility in as much as we're giving the government as much space to do what it thinks is necessary, we will be very, very vigilant and to give St. Lucians the comfort. People are concerned about their rights. People are concerned about being discriminated against, and I do not want to go in any debate or presentation of any evidence, Mr. Speaker, but to say that we will be vigilant, and we'll be exceptionally vigilant to make sure that there are no abuses with the powers that we are given. It is a responsible thing for us to do. I am one who have called for a war against the virus, for a mindset of war. I said so at the stakeholders meeting. But you're fighting a war, and the Public Health Act, the Quarantine Act, gives us all the legislative powers for us to fight that war and to have all the draconian measures that are necessary. So I just want the people of Sunshine to be assured that we are giving the government all the space to do whatever it thinks is necessary to fight the situation. And we will support as much as we can, but we will be very vigilant and make sure that there are no abuses. Thank you very much.
Member for Makewood North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to lend my voice of support to the motions before us for consideration and to echo some of what honorable members have said previously. And it's important to underscore these because whereas we can say with some degree of comfort that the majority of St. Lucians have adhered to the established protocols, there are some who need to be reminded. And in that respect, therefore, I want to say very clearly that no one in this country should encourage or should harbor anyone who has penetrated our borders illegally. That anyone who has sought to enter this beautiful island of ours by flagrantly going against the protocols already established should be encouraged to do so. And that we have a collective and individual responsibility to ensure that the authorities are notified whenever it is that we come to know that someone has breached these in one way or another. I understand what is being inferred by members opposite by raising concerns about the extraordinary powers that these motions speak to. But the beauty of a parliamentary system is that Her Majesty's opposition is meant to act as a check and balance on what government does. And that is such a beautiful facility. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt in my mind that the spirit in which we have crafted this and we have started to work will continue, and that Her Majesty's royal opposition will do exactly what it is crafted in law to do, which is to act as a check and balance on the activities of the executive, so to speak. Mr. Speaker, I also want to applaud, and I must do that, applaud the extraordinary effort of the educators in our country. Principals, teachers, they've stepped up in a huge way. In fact, it was rather fortuitous that only the day before so that we had had some commentary on what we were doing by transitioning to online learning platforms, etc. And there we had a real test of what we had been endeavoring to do. It also presented to us the opportunity to check and to assess the value of the interventions, therefore. But I must admit, it also exposed some gaps which we needed to address very quickly to ensure that we minimize disruption to instruction during this extraordinary period. I want to thank the medical practitioners and to thank the people within the various communities, be it in local governments, at the church level, the sporting fraternities, for the leadership role they have assumed and demonstrated in ensuring that they too become the ones to oversee the adherence to the protocols that the Ministry of Health has so widely published. Evidently, the theme of this year's Independence is really echoing in the minds of our people as we say, we're all in, let's do this together, all hands on deck. As has been said, this disease does not discriminate. It does not understand political, religious, ethnic, philosophical differences. It simply does not discriminate. And so I want for us to appreciate that in the spirit we've started, which is to treat this as a national crisis, which is what it is, a global crisis in fact, and that we do what is best for our beautiful nation as a collective, as good, honorable members of this House, regardless of our political differences. We're all in. Let's do this together.
Member for Castres South, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The debate today, well, I stand here, Mr. Speaker, first of all, on behalf of myself and my other colleague parliamentarians who, because of the situation on this side of the House, we all could not be present. While they are downstairs, we are up here conducting some of the business. And that is the nature of the virus that we have to deal with. And hence the reason why the resolution is coming before the Parliament in addition to the proclamation made by the Governor General that we need to extend that period for an additional about month or so. Mr. Speaker, it is important because we don't know if 2 weeks from now what the situation would be on the ground and what would be required. And while I understand the concerns raised by the member for Castres South in terms of some of the powers that reside under the health, the Quarantine Act, there are certain things that may be required with some level of immediate effect. And we don't know how much we would be able to do within a certain time frame. This is a very fluid situation. It is one that is changing by the hour. And so being able to be here and to be able to confer the powers. I have heard a few statements by the opposition, and I applaud the approach being taken. Just the one, we appreciate giving the government the space that is required, but there must be that level of inclusion and involvement that is required, because this is not a task that can be performed entirely by one side of the House. It is something, Mr. Speaker, that is required, and all Saint Lucians, both here and abroad, those who may think that we have taken a hard line that deprives them of being able to come home at this point in time, Mr. Speaker, because we have to look at our limitations, what we can accomplish, how well we can respond to the crisis that can develop. While we are not in that situation yet, we do not know what tomorrow or next week will be like. So it's an appeal for an understanding and an appreciation. And I know my colleague member wanted to speak, but because of time constraints also, the area of social distancing that we are trying to encourage, and we may even have to enforce, is not social shunning. It's not to shun people away or to push them away and to make them feel like they are leper, they are unclean, and they don't belong to the society. So our approach towards social distancing must have that decorum that is required so that people don't feel rejected. People don't feel that they are an outcast, but that we are going to do it in a loving way, in a way that when somebody wants to shake your hand or hug you, and you must do it with some level of politeness, that we have changed the order of things. Because, yes, have some class in how we treat each other in the process. And especially those in isolation or in quarantine. Family members through social media, through the phone, through different mediums, must be constantly in contact with those persons. Because it is a fight that we all are in together. And I really appreciate and applaud the approach of the Parliament today, Mr. Speaker, under your guidance, that we could have limited the numbers, and that we are, as we are appealing to all Saint Lucians, that all of us will play our part to see to it that we come through this crisis on the victorious side. And it is going to take a collective effort, which we have seen happening with our frontline workers, our nurses, our doctors. I mean, the move that is taking place even at this moment to the OKEU hospital to be able to facilitate VH as the respiratory hospital, Mr. Speaker. It is a Herculean effort that is taking place. And I applaud all who have been involved in the process. And I look forward to a few months from now, when we will come back to have a discussion that we all can be proud, not just as parliamentarians, but as St. Lucians, that we played our part and we came out of this victorious. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sure. Fine.
Member for Denrida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, I know I have to be extremely brief. During my previous presentation, I noticed your light came on, suggesting that I do what the member for Library would have called a rapid descent, and I never got a chance to speak to the state of emergency. But I just want to very quickly reiterate something that was said by the member for Castries South. We have agreed, Mr. Speaker, to give the Prime Minister the requisite power that he needs in the situation. And I think all of us on this side have said that much. But it is very important that we continue to be the custodians of the average St. Lucian. And that has nothing to do with mistrust. I have likened the situation to an aircraft. You bought an aircraft, you go through the safety drills. It doesn't matter whether you've traveled 100 times, you are still asked to fasten your seatbelt in a particular way. And if there's low cabin pressure, whatever drops from overhead. And this is all we're doing. We're saying that notwithstanding the powers have been given to the Prime Minister, we will continue to be vigilant. Because sometimes the transgressions may not necessarily come from above, but you have even officers on the ground in discharging their duties and responsibilities to constituents and ordinary St. Lucians. Sometimes they overstep their boundaries, and it is the parliamentarian that the aggrieved person would have to turn to for some measure of comfort. Mr. Speaker, like the leader of the opposition, very quickly, I just want to place on record my appreciation and that of the opposition to the many healthcare workers and all persons in the protective services who are on the front line working beyond the call of duty, the firemen, the Bureau of Health Education, the doctors, and the police who are being tugged in every direction these days. They have to help with the COVID situation, Mr. Speaker. The regular duties still remain. They have been called to provide reinforcement to security at the prison. And they are doing that, putting themselves at risk, putting their families at risk, but you seldom hear a complaint coming from fire officers, police officers, and the doctors. And I think as one of the highest authorities in the land, I think all of us, Mr. Speaker, need to commend the individuals who are putting themselves on the front line, as I said, for what has been a very, very exemplary effort for our people. So, Mr. Speaker, once again, I want to state that we are a resilient people and we shall overcome. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are a couple of amendments that we have discussed amongst ourselves that I want to give the assurances to my parliamentary colleagues that before I sign the order that I'll make sure that these amendments are made, but I just certainly want to make this statement publicly. So first of all, on the statutory instrument 2020, the arrangements of the sections, the emergency powers disaster COVID order, on section 16 where it says impose social distancing or isolation, it says 1, the competent authority may or by order impose isolation on all individuals within a particular area of the entire country in the interest of public health. And then 2, where the isolation has been imposed, the competent authority may, and then says A, require closure of all educational or religious institutions in the area specified. We thought it was not appropriate to specifically name out the religious, and so we're changing the word religious to social. Because this only speaks to the isolation, it's not speaking to the governance of any of these institutions, but we certainly wanted to make sure there was perfect clarity that we're not singling out any one institution. The second one is on the Emergency Powers Disasters Resolution to Parliament to approve the draft emergency powers, Mr. Speaker. On P, the publication of false statements, that we would have the prohibiting of the publication of false statements. P, right, instead of saying the publication of false statements, it would be the prohibition of, prohibition of the publication of false statements, right? Those would be the two adjustments I'll make, and I assure you all that we'll make that happen. And again, Mr. Speaker, I'm appealing to all solutions that the impact of what we're attempting to do here today can only happen with your cooperation, and it's 100%, not 99%, but 100% of your cooperation. And certainly to the individuals that may have participated in allowing Saint Lucians coming back from Martinique to come onto the island. A couple of you already have come forward, and not only the persons that came from Martinique were put into quarantine, but also the people who brought them in that they were staying with went into quarantine. That's the responsible thing to do. And I'm appealing to the other people in the communities that may be doing the same thing to come forward. The young man, and I'm not trying to highlight him or to scold him, who scaled the walls of the hotel and went away, it was his parents that brought him back. And again, in that circumstance, both he and the parents had to now go into quarantine. That is the responsible thing to do. And so I applaud that level of behavior, and if we make mistakes, that we try to rectify them as quickly as we can. Because now the term that we were using for our 40th anniversary now seems to become universal. We are all in. And we need, and the time is now, let's make this happen. So I appeal to all of us to be of each other's brother's keeper in being able to resolve this matter. Mr. Speaker, on that, I thank the members of this House, and I certainly hope your families well, and you well, and that we fight this thing and come out stronger than we entered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament approves the declaration of state of emergency that was published in the Gazette on the 23rd day of March 2020 as instrument number 49 of 2020, containing a declaration that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of 2019 nCoV, an infectious disease commonly known as COVID-19, for a further period of 26 days, commencing from the 31st day of March 2020, and ending on the 26th day of April 2020. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I ask for the House to be adjourned, it would be remiss of me if I also did not recognize the yeoman work that my CAPSEC and the members of the Prime Minister's office, but in particular, Mr. Speaker, the members of the Attorney General's office that have been burning the midnight oil for several nights. I want to thank them specifically for helping us and to continue to give us good advice in making it through this process, and that we protect the rights of all St. Lucians in doing so. So again, those particular offices is not to say that there are not more offices that are participating. The Ministry of Finance, who has an unenviable task of trying to manage the cash flow at this point. I think it would be also appropriate for me at this point to let all members of the civil service to breathe a sigh of relief, that salaries would be met in full this week, and so please don't suffer any more in that regard. And certainly we're hoping that we can do the same for many of the other affected citizens of this country. So again, on that note, Mr. Speaker, can I ask for the House to be adjourned, stand adjourned, sine die.
Honorable members, again, let me express my thanks to you for understanding what we're now dealing with. The Parliament will play its part. As we all said already, we're all in this together. And I wish you, Godspeed. The question is that this House do stand adjourned, sign it die. I now put a question. As many as of the contrary opinion, as many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. House stands suspended. Adjourned, sorry.
And the primers, there we've had the unanimous decision by the Parliament there for the state of emergency order to come into effect. And as that comes into effect, certain, as we indicated earlier, and as well as the Prime Minister when he presented the motion, that this now allows the Prime Minister to be able to go through certain processes without being hindered as it relates to the state's response to COVID-19. We heard from all members of the House pleading to St. Lucians to heed the warnings, heed the protocols that are being set, and of course, most importantly, to be vigilant. We know that a number of people have come back into communities after going through these illegal ports, and so the frontline workers, the doctors, nurses, are depending on communities to be able to alert them as to perhaps they know of these individuals, where they at, and how they now can move in to ameliorate the situation. The Prime Minister has indicated that a part of the quarantine and isolation, we'll be having 3 more hotels, Primus, which will be availing the properties there so that the country can continue with the management of quarantine and isolation. Very good news, Primus, as well. OKEU that full transition there is going to be complete by the end of this week, and so that now gives the state the opportunity to outfit Victoria Hospital to be transformed into a respiratory clinic or respiratory hospital. So, Primus, all in all, it would seem as if that we are moving afoot in order to be able to stay as much as possible ahead of COVID-19.
Lisa, Monsieur Madame, nous avons un bout de session qui est Parlement, côté tous les deux façades là, supporter motion qui était devant Kaila aujourd'hui pour mettre certains règles en place pour adresser la situation maladie corona COVID-19 et tous les deux façades là supporter bien fort situation ça là façade opposition dit il y a gouvernement toutes les choses qui sont nécessaires pour implémenter ces différentes règles là malgré il y a garder bien sérieux en manière à façon qui ça fait et que on a Chanel qui a représenté Valérie Mabouya qui est concerné à cette situation et qui a ce monde qui a représenté pour précaution et pour de pièces vulnérabilité qui peut exister en commune salaire qui a exposé plus de monde aux maladies corona. Récemment, le Premier ministre a annoncé 3 autres hôtels qui ont mis en place pour adresser la situation maladie pour ça mettre les gens qui ont besoin d'assistance et traitement en diverses façons pour protéger les autres monde. Aussi l'hôpital quand il dit OKIO qui est venu en opération tout de suite pour ça précaire toute affaire maladie pendant l'hôpital Victoria qui a adressé seulement la situation maladie COVID-19. C'est situation après ça nous à tout moment c'est là qui est venu ensemble pour ça discuter affaire ça là.
And as we go to break, we're seeing that there is the cleaning, the disinfecting of the chamber as the senators make their way in. We'll take a very short break from the Parliament and we'll return as the Senate convenes.